Now that the fear has returned to the markets, I'm going to go over the indices and some stocks to see where support is finally going to be made. And I'm going to start with the Dow Jones here, and I'm going to start on the weekly chart. But the point of this is I'm going to combine the weekly chart and the monthly chart together to determine where support is. So essentially, I'm looking at the Ichimoku and I'm looking to see if these levels hold. So for the Dow Jones, if the 39,811 for the conversion line or the baseline of 39,493, if they hold, then that will be the support. But if they don't hold, then they will probably go back to their monthly support. And where does that monthly support sit? Well, that monthly support sits down here where the ARK is, possibly down here, which is like the same thing, 39.9. But if that doesn't hold, then it's going to go back to the conversion line at 38,645, right? That'll be the new support for the Dow Jones if this weekly chart support right here does not hold around 39.5, right? So we're going to keep a close eye on these levels. And first, we're going to use the weekly support. If those weekly supports break, we're going to go change to the monthly support, which we just saw. So next, I'm going to pull up the SPX here. And it is currently trying to fight this conversion line, which is at 5452, right? That's 5452, and currently price closed below it, but the week is not over. And I know the futures do look a little bit down. They look negative right now. So we're going to keep an eye on that. But if that fails, then it's going to go to test the baseline, which is at 5293, right? So that'll be the next level of support. If that support does not hold, then it's going to go to the monthly support right here. And that's all the way down at 5108, right? 5108 on the monthly support. And again, I pointed this out before. The reason why things went down is because it hit resistance, right? It hit the resistance of the ARK up here, which was pretty obvious, right? Pretty obvious. So therefore, what's going to happen next? It's going to go to those weekly support levels, and then possibly if that breaks, then it could go to the 51. And if that breaks, then it's going to go retest this blue line down at 48, maybe like 48.20, right? Maybe 48.25 or so. Retest there. So there's many levels of support. The first one being this one right here, 52.93. Then the next one being the monthly chart, 51.08. And if that breaks, then the next one's at 48.25, right? So many levels of support, but we're going to take it step by step. And the first one is that weekly support that we just saw right here at 52.93. So I believe that could hold as a good support because if you look in the past, the baseline has been a pretty good support in the past. And then ever since back in October of 2023, it just took off and never really touched it since. So a backtest of that level would be perfectly normal, perfectly healthy, and it could even wick through to backtest these previous highs as well, right? So this chart is still really bullish on the high time frame despite the fear in the market. It just wants to find a new higher low wherever that might be. It could be around current levels or around 5200 or a little bit below. And next, let's go pull up the QQQ. So the QQQ is in a precarious situation right now. It's basically at the baseline. It lost that conversion line already. Then it went back up to retest it as a resistance. So that's confirmation that this conversion line was flipped to resistance. Now it's going back down to test the baseline again as support. And if that does fail, then it's probably going to go back down to retest this ARK, like I mentioned before, around 440. So do any of these numbers coincide with the monthly chart? 440, 458? Yeah, so the conversion line does sit at 434. So I kind of think that's where it's headed, right? Because the last time it really touched the conversion line, maybe it was back here in November, but really it's when it broke out here in March of 2023. So it hasn't really even touched that conversion line yet. So that would be perfectly normal and also perfectly healthy as well for a continuation higher. So I kind of expect that 440, 434 zone to get hit, especially since that weekly baseline is in danger of losing as support. And lastly, let's pull up the uh, IWM on the weekly chart. So this one, the weekly support right now sits around 213 for the conversion line, and then the next one, the baseline's at 209.35, right? So I believe this could offer some strong support now. After tried to break above resistance last week, it tried to continue higher, but then this week it looks like it has the possibility to close back below. And it might be like a magnet to these lower levels, the 213 or the 209. And I believe that level should offer some good support because if you look to the left of the chart, it would be a back test of the previous highs back here in March of 2000 or April of 2024, right? Just a simple back test of these candles right here, which would also be the baseline down there. So I believe that 209 could be the max pain, but if it's not, then we'll check out the monthly support here, and that sits around 203.42. So I think that could be like your worst case scenario there, around the 203.42, right? So essentially, this is still really bullish, right? And if you do look at the week or the monthly candle last month, it did close back above all levels. And now there's 28 more days left in the month for this candle to go all the way back down and even all the way back up to close back above as well. So it's not anything bearish. In fact, it looks really good, especially if it did backtest these levels. So essentially, on the high time frame, all these charts still look fine. There is no real danger. I know everybody's worried about a recession. People are really bearish on the charts now, but we just had a big run up. So a backtest of levels is perfectly normal. And now let's check out some individual stocks. We're going to start with CrowdStrike since it's taken a massive beating lately. And what do we see here on the weekly chart? It successfully backtested the bottom of the cloud. So this could offer some support, right? It could offer some really good support. And if we look to the left of the chart here, you can see that these candles were backtested, right? So this is a successful backtest of that level. And if you look even more to the left, that level was very important. So this level could wick through a little tomorrow and then maybe close back above and hold, right? But what do we see below? You see the 200-week moving average and you see the 100-week moving average sitting right there. So does anything on the monthly chart coincide with that? Well, yeah, actually, that 200 level is the 50-month moving average down there. And it's the top of the leading span A of the cloud as well. So if that cloud breaks on the weekly chart around current price, then I could expect it to go to the low 200s where this confirmation of a new higher low would be made. Because if you look on the monthly chart, look at all these green candles in a row. So it's just simply backtesting previous levels down here before it broke out, which is perfectly healthy still, right? And if we look here on the indicators of the Ichimoku, you can see if it did come back down for support right here, the new resistance would be at this this baseline around 243, and then the arc up here possibly around 250, and then the conversion line even sits over there at 300. So there is a ways to go, and I do believe that if it did hit the lower 200s, I believe that would be an exceptional opportunity for price to find its new higher low and then reverse to continue higher and higher. And next, we're going to pull up Tesla. And first, we'll do Tesla on the weekly chart. So the weekly indicators are all sitting right down here in this big confluence right here around 212, 210, and even down here at the baseline at 204.90, right? This is a lot of confluence of support right here. So I believe it's possible to get a wick down there to get to these levels and then possibly reverse. And on the monthly chart, is there anything coinciding with those levels? Yes. Yes, there are. So we can see that the conversion line, the blue one down here, sits at 201.97, and the baseline right there sits at 208.24. So that's even more confluence of the lower 200s being support. And you can see clearly how this closed above the 50-week moving average the past month, but then it opened a new month below it and it retested it and confirmed it that it's still resistance, right? So that 230 zone is still big resistance, but there's still, again, 28 days left in the month to close back above these levels, especially the 382 around 221, 222, right? So it looks like the lower 200s would be a very solid support, and I don't think it's going to go lower than that. And even the bottom of this cloud could be all it's going to get, around 213, right? That could be the maximum pain, and it could just hold there for a reversal. So I'm going to keep an eye on these levels, but essentially, this chart still looks very bullish with lots of support below. And next, I have NVIDIA on the weekly chart, and it's still holding on to its baseline as support. And it hasn't really lost that baseline as support since, oh, way back here, possibly in January of 2023. It's held that baseline as support for a long time. So far, the trend is your friend, right? And that's why we saw that bounce earlier, because it hit there and it reversed, right? And then there's even more confluence of all these angles of the arc of the blue level as support as well. So let's take a look at the monthly chart to see any more confluence. So if that weekly convert or baseline loses support, then where does this conversion line sit for the monthly chart? Down at 92.89. So again, let's go take a look at that. Yeah, 103.50. Then below that, you have this blue line at 96. And then after that, you have the monthly conversion line at 92.89. So it looks like that could be your max pain scenario, especially since it's lining up perfectly with the bottom arc down there. So I believe that around the 103 down to the 96 or even the 92, 93 would be a great support zone. And even if it went down there, it still would be a good setup for retesting previous resistance, flipping it to support to continue higher and higher. And next we have ARKK. And here on the weekly chart, I have the 100 week moving average, which is in blue right here. And this blue line sits at 42.19. And that also coincides with my blue angle right here, which was also important before. And it looks like price wants to gravitate there and test it again. Now, if we go to the monthly chart, let's see more confluences of support. And sure enough, the baseline sits right here at 41.98. So it looks like price does want to gravitate down to these lower levels to backtest these levels. And this actually would be the first successful backtest since it broke above right here back in June, maybe June 3rd, the week of June 3rd of 2024. So it hasn't backtested it yet. But one thing I wanted to point out is the conversion line did have a bullish cross above the baseline down here. And that's really the first time these met right here since, we'll go back in price, in time, since right here. And during COVID, that's the last time those lines touched. And they touched right here in March of 2020, and they touched again in April of 2020. And then what do you see price did? It wicked low, and then it took off, right? So this could just turn into a wick here, and it could take off again because that is a bullish cross, and you haven't really seen anything since 2020. You haven't seen this kind of like closeness of the conversion line and the baseline. So essentially, it's just doing the same thing and wants to backtest levels. And next I have Coinbase here, and Coinbase is looking like it's back below the 50% level. And after hours, I think it went up to 219 or so, but there's really no resistance or support there. So it could still just trend lower until it gets to this weekly baseline, which is at 199 exactly, right? And if we go to the monthly, is there any other confluence of support? Yeah, the monthly chart is also the conversion line at 199 exactly. So I believe that is going to be a magnet for price because a lot of confluence of that exact number. So despite the positive price action that we saw after hours, I do believe that price does want to drift a little bit lower and possibly even go back test this 382 down here at 183. That would also be a possibility, but this market structure also still very bullish, nothing bearish about it at all on the high time frame. So all it looks like it wants to do is simply back test previous levels. And next I have Amazon, and Amazon reported earnings. And where did Amazon end up after hours? We'll take a look at the 4-hour chart. Okay, 171. So that is essentially below this 183.47 baseline. So that means it's losing that support. And now, is it going to gravitate down to this 163? Well, let's look at the monthly chart to see if there's any other support before that 163 level. And there is. The conversion line sits here at 171, right? And where did we see price exactly after hours? Well, let's take a look at it again one more time. So remember that right here, 171.33 is the monthly baseline. Where does price sit after hours? 171. So this could be a buy the open possibly event, right? It could be that event. So if it opens here, then I mean, the futures are down quite a bit right now, so it could open a little bit lower and then possibly just wick back above. So I think anything in like the mid 160s, even down to that 163 level right here. And I'm going to go pull this up right here because a monthly chart, there's still 28 days left, right? So there is a possibility to wick a lot through this 171, go down to that weekly support right here around 163, and then hold that support to go back up. So I believe this would be your target right here, 163. And then I think at the end of the month, it would probably close back above that 171 level that we saw on the monthly chart. And next I have Apple here, and Apple looks like on the weekly chart, it's still holding the conversion line as support, and that's at 214.69. So if that breaks, what do we see on the monthly chart below? Well, on the monthly chart below, we have my downward sloping angle down here, which sits around 213, and that could be some support because if it's not, it could go much lower down to this levels in the 190s or the lower 190s down here to the conversion line at 194.28. But before that, on the weekly chart, we can see that 200 exactly is that baseline, and that is essentially the previous all-time high back here in December of 2023. When you look to the left of the chart, it could wick below and hit that 199 level where it hit back in December of 2023. So I believe that's where price might gravitate towards if this conversion line gets lost as support. But currently, after hours, it's about 219. But again, the futures are looking pretty weak right now. And so that's possible that this could not hold to drift lower to this next level of support. And next I have Alphabet, Google. So this already lost the conversion line up here at 177, and now it's drifting lower. And it looks like the possibility to get to the baseline around 161 is now there, right? It hasn't touched that baseline since March of 2024. So a retest of that is perfectly normal and perfectly healthy, and this market structure is still bullish. And it was really obvious where resistance was. It lined up perfectly with my Gann arc up here. But is there any other confluence of this 161 level? Let's see on the monthly chart. Kinda. A little bit lower is this conversion line at 156.98. So around that 160, around that 156, that could be the next target. Even if that ever got lost, then I believe a retest of this 147, 150 zone of this previous all-time high back here would be possible, right? I believe one level at a time, but if each level gets lost, then the ultimate target could be this 147 or 150 level. So we're going to keep an eye on those levels and see if they can hold. And next we have Meta, and Meta is essentially above the conversion line, it's above the baseline, above everything, except for my 45-degree angle, it is not above. So essentially it's still at resistance, right? It tried to break everything as support back here, but it failed, and now it's still under resistance. So if these levels do not hold, if this baseline does eventually break, which they're getting really close together, right? If they don't, if it doesn't hold, then it could go down to this 50-week moving average, which is now at 414. But if we go to the monthly chart, is there anything around that 414 level? Yeah. Basically the conversion line sits at 422, which essentially sits exactly around my bottom arc there, which would just be a back test of that level, which would also be perfectly normal, perfectly healthy for a successful back test to try to continue higher. So again, one level at a time. Let's see if it can hold this 45-degree angle, and if it can break back above it. Right now it's currently below. Possibly it can continue higher sooner, but if it loses those weekly indicators that I mentioned, then a back test of those lower levels becomes possible. So we'll just take it one level at a time. So essentially, on all the charts that I just showed you, from the indices down to these individual stocks, everything is essentially just back testing previous levels. And so far, the charts are not broken. Nothing is broken. Everything is going according to plan. So if you hear all these negative news narratives or recession is coming, yeah, that could scare you. But when you zoom out, everything is still going according to plan. There is nothing really scary about these charts yet. They are not losing their high time frame supports at all. They're just back testing those levels. So I would just stay positive, and let's take these indicators one level at a time to see where the final support will be.